Very good evening. I'm Ben Kitili at the Standard Group Center here in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Many thanks for joining us on the broadcast tonight, this Monday, the 16th day of January 2017, the day the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC, the election managers in the August 8th general election launched or kick-started the second and final phase of the mass voter registration exercise that is targeting, according to the IEBC projections, between 4 to 6 million new voters on the voters' roll. Remember, currently the IEBC has around 15.9 million registered voters on their books. This is yet, to be audited because some quarters have been saying that this includes supposed dead voters. So the IEBC needs to clean that up and add another 4 to 6 million voters. That process began today in the entire country. Of course, no hitches were reported, and Kenyans have 1 month until the 14th of February to be part of this mass voter registration exercise, a very important exercise for the IEBC, for Kenyans, as they seek to go into the elections in about 7 months' time. And that is what we'll be seeking to discuss tonight on the show. We won't be having a lot of politics tonight. We'll talk about the all-important issue of voter listing. I have with me here in studio former Commissioner of the now-defunct Electoral Commission of Kenya, ECK, that is Ambassador Jack Tumwa. He is with me here. We shall also be talking to Dr. Walter Ongeti, that is, of course, a governance and strategy expert. He'll be joining us live from our City Center studios just to put perspective into some of these issues, try and answer very many small queries that Kenyans have, try to understand the issue of voter listing as far as the IEBC is concerned. Very important stage for the IEBC, which is set to announce new commissioners this week, that is, if everything goes according to plan. Many thanks for joining us. I am Ben Kitili. Let's take a look at let's set the stage, of course, and the IEBC did launch that mass voter listing today. Let's start with what the governor of the county of Nairobi, Evans Kidero, had to say. Remember, this was done region to region, and this is the Nairobi region, Governor Evans Kidero. Let's listen into that.
It dramatically reduces the risk of electoral fraud and should prevent any repeat, at least some of the polling anomalies experienced in 2013 and 2007. Anybody with a pulse and who's legally entitled to vote should be tracked down and confirmed on the electoral register, and that cannot be overstated. Database errors of people who have died or who never existed because they were registered fraudulently must be crossed off the register, and this can only be achieved with a modernized online registration process that's easier and more secure than the one we've had before. Every year in Nairobi, statistics indicate that of the 4 million people, 80,000 people die. There must be an automatic electronic mechanism of removing these people from not only the registration database, but also the voter registers. The potential number of voters we know in this coming year is about 26 million. So, unless we have more than 14 million people to vote, then whatever results that will come out will not validate or express or represent the opinion of Kenyans. We live in Nairobi, we work in Nairobi. So Nairobi people should be given IDs in Nairobi to enable them to vote. Also, the women, when they are married, when they go for IDs, they are told to go back to the parents where they were born so that they can get the IDs. That's discrimination. It's unconstitutional.
Nairobi Governor Evans Kidero there. This was replicated across the Republic, different regions. The IEBC even projecting some of the numbers that the figures they are expecting in different regions, saying they expect, for example, 420,000 new voters from Central and Upper Eastern regions. Let's now listen in to the Coalition for Reforms and Democracy CORD leader Raila Odinga, who also did speak during that launch, urging Kenyans to come out and register as voters and be vigilant so that to make sure that the process goes on smoothly.
We must go into it as Kenyans, not as members of this party or this other party. So the partisan day will come when Kenyans are making a decision on the 8th of August. Before that time, we must work together, we must close ranks as a people. So don't begin to fight on partisan basis when people are registering as voters. Let them come and register as Kenyans, because if somebody is transferring from one area to the area, he's also leaving a hole where he's coming away from, to come here. But the thing is that it may not be proper for any leader to be elected in a constituency with the imported voters from another constituency. We want the people to report after the start of the exercise, where, for example, they are noticing unusual slowness or unusual requirements being imposed by those who are in the field, so that this can be then reported to the center and remedial action taken immediately. We also want them to report late openings of stations or early closures of stations. This is also what we don't want to see happening. But we want also to appeal to our people all over the country to cooperate and be friendly to the officials of the IEBC, wherever they are. Cooperate and work closely with them. And we also want them to be patient. Don't be impatient. You see, haraka haraka, haina baraka. You've seen today a very long convoy of trucks standing around, people asking, what is the problem? What is it? The people tend to read mischief whenever they see heavy deployment of security forces. So we want those to remain in the camps, and that they only come when they are needed. We are a civil society. We don't want too much show of might, because the power, after all, rests with the people. It is only donated to everybody else.
So from here, of course, the court leader and other leaders going to different parts of the country to rally their supporters to come out and register as voters. The Deputy President, William Ruto, also calling on Kenyans to come out in large numbers.
Let us put everything else aside. All of us. Let's put everything else aside. Let us go and get everybody registered as a voter.
Go and collect your IDs, register as voters, and turn out to vote in large numbers.
We are going to start a drive with members of parliament and all stakeholders to make sure that those who are registered collect their IDs, and then after collecting the IDs, they also register as voters.
All right, that is what we are talking about. It is the big story. It is the biggest story probably of the month as Kenyans prepare to go out there and register as voters. The Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC, coming out to launch this month-long exercise. On our Twitter poll question this evening, we are asking you, we are seeking to engage you on the same. Is the process of registration clear to you? A lot of Kenyans have been asking a lot of questions on what needs to be done there. We hope we'll be able to answer some of those questions. We're asking you, is the process of registration as a voter clear to you? Tell us what you think by tweeting us at Ben_Kitili at KTN News. The hashtag is Choice2017. Right now, let's now bring on my guests, and I have with me Ambassador Jack Tumwa, former Commissioner of the now defunct Electoral Commission of Kenya, ECK. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ben.
We also have coming to us live from our City Center studios, Dr. Walter Ongeti, a governance and strategy expert. Good evening, Dr.
Good evening, Ben.
All right. In the next 45 minutes or so, we shall try and answer as many questions and cover as many issues as possible. Ambassador, how important is this voter, the mass? Remember, there has been continuous registration of voters ongoing, which has not borne much fruit for the IEBC. But how important, how vital is this mass voter registration, the second one, remember?
Then allow me to start by putting the event of registration in proper perspective.
Right.
Registration is the third event in the electoral cycle. We start the election cycle by having a legal framework in place. In our case, we have the constitution in place. Then you divide the countries into constituencies. In our place, we've got counties, we've got constituencies, we've got wards. That has been done. Now, the third very important event is what we are now going through, the registration. I feel excited that this particular time, our political leaders have taken a lead in going out to promote, to get people out to come and register. I think it's the first time that I do remember that our political leaders are doing this, and that is very positive.
Right.
In the past, it has been mainly left to the electoral body, and it has been very difficult, very costly. This time, I believe it is going to be done, and it's going to be done properly. Now, we are aiming at 9 million people who are registered, who are outside there. They have got ID cards and they have not registered.
Right.
Over and above that, we've got other people who don't have ID cards and they would like to vote. Those ones have been left out. We've got also another big number of people who have their cards issued, but they are left, they are in the offices within their local areas. So all these groups should have been brought in. I would have liked the register of persons to be out with the registration officers so that those people who wish to get IDs to enable them to vote can be given an opportunity. Yeah, can be decided and have the opportunity to vote. So far, I'm not really sure what arrangements the Register of Persons has made to bring this group of people in our circle.
Important point that you bring out, the issue of national identity cards. Daktari, in the first phase of the mass voter registration by the IEBC, the electoral body was targeting 4 million voters. They got only slightly more than 1 million. What do you think the IEBC should do differently if they are to realize these huge numbers they expect this time round?
Thank you, Ben. Of course, Kenyans were aware that there will be a second voter mass registration like this one. And so Kenyans like the last-minute approach, which now we are hoping that they are going to bank on to register. Of course, IEBC has its challenges in terms of financial resources. It has its challenges in terms of the commission, which we are hoping and then can be in place latest maybe next week. So they can only do as much. And so as Ambassador is putting it, we are going to largely depend on the politicians and media to be able to whip Kenyans to register to vote. IEBC, as it is currently formatted, and realizing again in terms of the timelines that they have to do the other activities, they may be so strained to be relied upon to really mobilize Kenyans to vote.
The Ambassador mentioned something very important. Let's get into it, the issue of national identity cards. Why do you think there are so many uncollected ID cards?
Ben, I'll speak to this from experience and also just having operated with Kenyans at the very local level. That Kenyans in some areas in this country do not really understand the importance of an ID card. Ideally, it's because the way things have been is that life has been quite difficult in such a way that you don't really realize why you need an ID. you have life challenges. I mean, nobody has ever told you that you need an ID and so forth. So people apply for it, perhaps because a neighbor has applied for it, and then because they do not go beyond their village, then therefore they don't even go to collect it. The other reason, and I think this is one of the areas then we need to be thinking about, is synchronizing the registration of voters to the registration of persons. You had just a month ago or thereabout when the KCS results were being announced, and the cabinet secretary came up with a very interesting proposal from the president that you will be coming up with the registration number you get in primary school, you go with it all the way to university and so forth. Now, look here, there is the identification number. Then at some point you get another number which is called personal identification number, PIN. Right. Then you go to some other place you call NSSF number, then NHIF number, then payee number, then now voter registration number. And all these numbers confuse Kenyans. We need to get in this information
and synchronize technology. All that information.
We need to synchronize all this information to some usable number which can actually be used across board, including voter registration.
Ambassador, you have been part of an election management team. What Daktari is proposing, is it practical?
In fact, Ben, this question of synchronizing the numbers started way back in 1997. A proposal was made, and I think it was consumed in the Golden Bag or something like that. It was something that once you're born, you get your birth certificate, you get at 18, you automatically qualify to get an ID, which will be everything. Like in America, they have got what they call national security card or something like that. That serves you in all matters. It is a problem here because if you ask people why they don't take ID cards, someone will tell you what is it for. And I mean, like my brother said, in the countryside, why do they need cards? What is at stake? They don't see the need. In Kenya, things like voting is not compulsory. So it is left at the choice of the individual. They don't have sufficient information. They don't have enough education. And I said this morning, I want to say it again. This is where I with a lot of respect, disagree with His Excellency the President when he said Kenyans don't need voter education. I think we need voter education.
Do you think the IEBC does enough voter education?
It does a lot of voter education. In fact, the problem that has been is lack of resources. They don't have sufficient resources to do as much voter education as we would have liked them to do. That is a big constraint. But of course, the reception also at the other end, do people value it? I am saying that something like voting in this country, I think the politics of this country has not been encouraging voters to come out and take IDs, take voters' card to go and vote. You stay in the countryside, and people will tell you, what is the point of me going to vote anyway? What is there for me?
All right. Let's get into the issue. This show is usually about politics. We're not going to talk politics tonight, but voter listing is all about politics. And politicians, Ambassador, have been coming out, both sides of the political divide, to urge especially those that are called strongholds, according to them, to come out in large numbers and register as voters to make sure they have numbers going into August 2017. Let me start with you, Daktari. How should the politicians do it, that is mobilizing Kenyans to come out and register as voters?
I think, Ben, this is a very critical issue, and it's good that you've spoken of it. I mean, if you look at the way CORD has mapped the way it wants to really mobilize its voters, it is mapping it along its strongholds. And of course, I've not seen the Jubilee mapping so far, but people are already talking about Jubilee strongholds. Now, we will now soon move from strongholds and start calling them zones. So meaning that we start zoning the country when we are talking about mobilization of voters, and which becomes very, very unfortunate. Ideally, and I've spoken of it before, that it is important, and I like the way Raila put it today, that Kenyans should be encouraged to register as voters, because then we are encouraging them to speak of decisions around governance of their own country. And that should be the spirit that I would like to see Jubilee a team going to what are perceived to be CORD strongholds and really mobilizing Kenyans to register as voters. I would also like to see the Jubilee and the CORD actually fraternity in the so-called CORD strongholds.
Right.
I mean vice versa. So much so that we have all Kenyans registered as voters, the 9 million plus, the ones who are already there. And then from there, we can now start asking ourselves, look, what are the policies? What are the manifestos of each of these other parties? But Ben, allow me to just speak of something that Ambassador mentioned about voter education. If you look at the kind of structure that we've had after the constitutional dispensation, you realize that we came up with a position of governor, senator, MCA, and so forth, and Kenyans, and women rep. Mm-hmm. The women rep position is a position that most Kenyans were never aware of what its role was. And so people went out there, opponents of the strong ladies who had vied for MP, governor, and so forth, and told them, look, don't vote for this lady here because we have already reserved for them a position called a women rep position. That is just one of the issues that revolve around voter education, and it is something that also should be dovetailed into this process of voter registration.
Interesting thought, Dr. Dr. has mentioned something about zoning. Political competition tells me that those politicians will not go where they don't think they have support. Ambassador, how thin is that line?
Politicians being politicians, they will do the zoning. I think the institution that has to come up very strongly and bridge this gap of the zoning is the IEBC. Because what worries me now, like my brother said, the electronic membership for the Jubilee.
All right.
Is it in a way conditioning people from the beginning that you got this card and therefore you have to vote for that particular party? Is there sufficient education to say that even if you have that card, it is possible at the voting you can vote for another party, or you take it and that you are stuck to it? So zoning is dangerous, and I think that is one of the things that we Kenyans have to look at very critically. We are zoning this country according to political parties, and I keep saying that in this country we don't have political parties. We have political parties, tribal parties dressed into a gown of political parties. Right. And that is extremely dangerous. I think that is something we have to focus on and plead with our politicians, like my brother said, let them crisscross. Let the Jubilee go to Nyanza to register people. Let the code come to Central to register people so that we can see the crisscrossing. And of course, the IEBC has to do a lot more to assist to bridge this gap.
So the mandate is on those political parties. Let's talk about another issue, Ambassador, and that is the issue of the state of the voter register. Mm-hmm. Having been part of the election management team in this country for many years, as part of the 15.9 million voters that we have right now, even the IEBC tells me, the CEO told me that is still, they haven't cleaned it up. That could include dead Kenyans and all that. How does that process go on, the process of cleaning up that? Because he said we still have to audit that voters' roll. How is that cleaning up done?
You remember when this parliamentary group came up, there was an argument whether we should have a complete new registration, total. Some people argued that we continue with the old registration, but we have an audit to come and look at the register cities so that they can, if there are dead fellows who are still in the register, they can be cleaned. And I believe the audit is working on that. I'm hoping that it will come out quickly enough so that people know exactly what is the exact number of the people who are registered. With regard to the new people that the IEBC has targeted, 6 million, to me is a little ambitious. It is a good target for them because I think it's always good to aim high so that if you don't get
to 20.
But going to by what happened when they targeted 4 million and they got only 1.5, you see there's a problem. And now it is even more complicated. Complicated in that with the drought that we have in the country, I don't know whether one can convince that old woman who is looking for leaves to go and feed the child at home to leave that and go to register. So there are a little more complications. Secondly, you know that the devices for registration, I think they are using on about 7,000, as opposed to the 16 that they used last time. So these are the challenges that it is facing, and I wish they could get the target of 6 million.
All right.
If they get 4 million, I would be happy.
You'll be happy. Dr. what's your take on this issue of auditing the voter register?
I think, of course, as Ambassador is putting it, registering voters afresh could have been the best thing to happen. But if you are going to be lucky to get 4 now, and you had dropped the initial register, which has 15 million, then it would have been very tricky to raise cumulatively 6 million registered voters, meaning that you will have less than, let's say, a third of the entire population determining the destiny of the entire country. Mm-hmm. So I think as we move forward, therefore, we need to improve our processes and so forth, because we are also a country that is also continuously learning. And so for now, we can only rely on the audit and also bank on the fact that we can register additional voters. As I said earlier, if in future we are able to synchronize births, deaths, and all these registration processes that go in between, then we'll be better off than where we sit today. Because if somebody passes on today, some of the people pass on, like now what Ambassador is talking about, in drought-stricken areas. If somebody passes on and through one way or another that death is not registered, then you may not synchronize it very well from this particular register. So it means that that person may likely appear in this register. Again, from my own observation of how maybe registration of death is done in this country, it's still a manual system, and sometimes you may find that updating of that process takes a little bit of a while. So it will not be 100%, but we will have to make do with what is there.
There's an accusation that has been floated around much for the last 3 years. When the accusation of rigging is mentioned, the issue of dead voters is usually not very far away from that. Is there the danger of that happening again after 2017? And or do you think that there's enough political will from both sides of the political divide to just go into this election?
Ben, if such a scenario were to occur, I think it will be two-way. So it will be a knock-off effect, if you ask me. So I think for now, if you ask me, then we just need to have stringent measures. And of course, one of the challenges that has faced some of these political parties, and that is where zoning has all limitations, is you find that you don't have maybe a Jubilee agent in a purely called stronghold or vice versa. So you leave it to the mandarins and agents around that area to deal with whatever is there. And you'll find that in some scenarios, which is actually maybe Ambassador has experienced is this, that you have 99.9 of all the registered voters casting their votes, both sides. And so that tells you that there is something that is beyond what you can actually tell.
Ambassador, what's your experience with
that? That is real. We had one station which had 101% voter turnout. So these dead people coming out to vote is real. Because what happens is that in some stations, for example, in the Central Province, it is very difficult for agents from the opposition to go to do the supervision. Similarly, in Nyanza, it's very difficult for people from the other side to go and do the monitoring. So it is left at the mercy of the returning officer, the presiding officer, and the clerks. If these 3 people collude, the possibility of dead people turning out to vote is real. And it is something that we have experienced. We saw it in 1997. We saw it in 2002. 2007, we did not go into the auditing of what came up because of what happened. Yeah. But it's something that is really, it happens.
All right, we are talking about the voter registration, the mass voter registration, which kicked off today across the country, will be continuously ongoing for the next 30 days, for the next 1 month. On our Twitter poll question, we're asking you if the process of registration as a voter is clear to you. After the break, when we return, we shall be taking a look at some of your tweets on what you think. Also, we shall be talking about the issue of technology going into the 2017 general election, as well as the situation at the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. New commissioners could be in office this week. Stay with us.